7 legends. 7 unforgettable careers. From fearless defenders to elegant playmakers, from unstoppable goalscorers to football's ultimate warrior, these players inspired millions and helped shape the beautiful game. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's collection of true footballing icons. Fabio Cannavaro, heart over height. Football has always believed one simple rule. The greatest centre-backs are giants, towering defenders, physically dominant, impossible to beat in the air. Cannavaro believed something different. He believed courage could beat size, timing could beat strength, heart could beat height. And over the next 2 decades, he proved the football world wrong. Born in Naples in 1973, Cannavaro grew up in a city where football wasn't just a sport. It was life. The streets were filled with dreams. The stadium echoed with passion. And one man inspired every young defender: Diego Maradona. Watching the world's greatest player every week taught Cannavaro something important. Greatness isn't given. It's earned. There was only one problem. He didn't look like a future centre-back. He wasn't 6'4". He wasn't physically intimidating. He wasn't built like the defenders dominating European football. Many believed he was simply too small. Football has always loved stereotypes. Tall defenders, quick wingers, powerful strikers. Cannavaro didn't fit the mold. So he created his own. Instead of relying on height, he mastered timing. Instead of relying on strength, he mastered positioning. Instead of relying on size, he mastered anticipation. Every match became the same challenge. Another giant striker. Another aerial battle. Another opportunity to prove people wrong. When towering forwards looked across the halfway line, they saw one of the smallest centre-backs in elite football. Many smiled. Many underestimated him. Most regretted it. Because Cannavaro played football like a chess master. He wasn't chasing the game. He was reading it. 3 passes ahead. 3 movements ahead. 3 seconds ahead. By the time a striker realized what was happening, Cannavaro had already won the ball. His performances for Napoli quickly earned admiration across Italy. Then came Parma, one of Serie A's most exciting teams. A dressing room filled with talent. Gianluigi Buffon, Lilian Thuram, Juan Sebastian Veron, Hernan Crespo. Yet Cannavaro never looked out of place. Italian football in the 1990s was football's toughest classroom. Every weekend brought another world-class striker. Gabriel Batistuta, Ronaldo, Christian Vieri, George Weah, Alessandro Del Piero in training with the national team. The very best. Cannavaro didn't survive against them. He competed with them. Again and again. People questioned his height. Again and again. He answered on the pitch. Heart over height. As the years passed, something remarkable happened. People stopped talking about what Cannavaro lacked. They started talking about everything he possessed. Leadership, timing, aggression, composure, fearlessness. He became the defender teammates trusted. The defender coaches admired. The defender strikers hated facing. Not because he intimidated them with his size, but because he gave them nothing. No space. No easy chances. No second opportunities. Some defenders wait for mistakes. Cannavaro created them. One perfectly timed tackle. One interception. One towering leap against a striker much taller than himself. Time after time, he reminded football of one simple truth. Heart over height. Then came the greatest challenge of his career. One tournament. That would change everything. The greatest test of Fabio Cannavaro's career. The FIFA World Cup. Not just another tournament. The biggest stage football has to offer. Italy arrived carrying expectation. Cannavaro carried something even heavier. The captain's armband. Captains don't just organize. They inspire. They calm. They lead when everything around them becomes chaotic. Fabio Cannavaro became the heartbeat of Italy. Game after game. The challenge grew. Bigger strikers. Faster attacks. More pressure. Yet the bigger the moment became, the bigger Cannavaro seemed. Not because he had suddenly grown taller. Because his courage grew with the occasion. Every tackle mattered. Every interception mattered. Every header mattered. Every decision mattered. Against Ukraine. Against Germany. Against France. Italy's defense stood firm. At the center of everything was Cannavaro. Reading danger before it arrived. Stepping in at exactly the right moment. Winning battles he was never supposed to win. Football teaches defenders to react. Cannavaro rarely reacted. He anticipated. That was his greatest gift. He wasn't chasing attackers. He was arriving before they did. Then came Germany. The World Cup semi-final. 90,000 supporters. One place in the final at stake. Wave after wave of attacks. Cannavaro refused to break. One block. Another tackle. Another clearance. Another perfectly timed interception. Every time Germany believed they had found a way through, there he was. Italy reached the World Cup final. One match away from immortality. France. Led by Zinedine Zidane. One of the greatest footballers ever to play the game. The world watched. Millions expected brilliance from the attackers. Instead, they witnessed a defensive masterclass. Cannavaro organized. Encouraged. Protected. Led. Every teammate believed. Because their captain believed. Heart over height. When the final whistle blew, Italy were world champions. Fabio Cannavaro lifted the FIFA World Cup. One of football's most iconic images. A captain standing on top of the world. Then came something nobody expected. The Ballon d'Or. The highest individual honor in football. Usually reserved for dazzling forwards. Creative playmakers. Goal scorers. Not defenders. Yet in 2006, the football world recognized something extraordinary. Cannavaro wasn't simply the best defender on earth. He had been the best footballer. A centre-back. Winning the Ballon d'Or. It remains one of football's rarest achievements. People often ask how someone without exceptional height became one of history's greatest defenders. The answer was never hidden. It was there every weekend. Every tackle. Every leap. Every perfectly timed challenge. He never tried to be the tallest. He simply became the smartest. Football has produced defenders who were stronger. Defenders who were taller. Defenders who looked more intimidating. But football has rarely produced a defender who understood the game quite like Cannavaro. He turned positioning into an art. Timing into a weapon. Leadership into inspiration. He proved that courage can overcome size. That intelligence can overcome strength. That determination can overcome doubt. Heart over height. Young defenders around the world were told they were too small, too light, too weak. Cannavaro gave them something priceless. Belief. Because if he could stand against the world's greatest strikers, so could they. Football measured him in centimeters. History measured him in greatness. That is why Cannavaro will always remain a true footballing icon. Not because he was the tallest. Not because he was the strongest. But because he proved the size of your heart will always matter more than the size of your frame. Heart over height. That wasn't just Cannavaro's story. It became his legacy. What is your favorite Fabio Cannavaro moment? Dennis Bergkamp, the genius who never needed pace. Football has always fallen in love with speed. The fastest winger, the quickest striker, the player who could leave defenders behind in a single sprint. Dennis Bergkamp offered football something completely different. He didn't outrun defenders. He outthought them. Long before the ball reached his feet, he already knew where it was going next. While everyone else reacted, Bergkamp was creating the future. Born in Amsterdam in 1969, Dennis Bergkamp grew up surrounded by football. In the Netherlands, the game wasn't simply played. It was understood. Every pass mattered. Every movement had a purpose. Every player learned to think before acting. For Bergkamp, that became second nature. At Ajax, his extraordinary talent quickly became impossible to ignore. The famous academy wasn't interested in producing athletes. It produced football thinkers. And Dennis Bergkamp became one of its brightest students. His touch was effortless. His vision was extraordinary. His composure seemed endless. While other young forwards chased defenders, Bergkamp studied them. He watched how they moved, how they turned, where they looked. Then he exploited every weakness. His legs followed the game. His mind was already there. Goals came naturally. But Bergkamp wasn't obsessed with scoring. He was obsessed with creating beauty. The perfect first touch. The perfect pass. The perfect finish. Football became his canvas. Europe soon came calling. Inter Milan, one of the biggest clubs in the world. A dream move. Or so it seemed. Italian football in the 1990s was brutal. Space disappeared instantly. Defenders hunted every mistake. Every touch came under pressure. For the first time in his career, football stopped feeling natural. The move never truly worked. Critics questioned him. Some wondered if Ajax had made him look better than he really was. Others believed he simply wasn't suited to Italian football. Great careers are rarely straight lines. Sometimes, they need the right home. That home arrived in North London. Arsenal. English football. A league built on speed, strength, physical battles. Many believed Bergkamp would struggle again. They couldn't have been more wrong. Instead of changing his football, Bergkamp changed English football. Supporters had rarely seen touches like his. First touches that killed the ball instantly. Passes that split entire defenses. Moments that seemed impossible. Until Dennis Bergkamp made them look easy. The Premier League slowed down every time he touched the ball. Defenders rushed towards him. Bergkamp welcomed them. Because every challenge created another opportunity. A quick turn. A disguised pass. A perfectly weighted through ball. By the time defenders realized what had happened, the attack had already begun. His legs followed the game. His mind was already there. Soon Arsenal weren't simply winning matches. They were creating memories. And Dennis Bergkamp was at the center of them all. But the greatest moments of his remarkable career were still to come. Some players are remembered for statistics. Others, for moments. Dennis Bergkamp gave football moments that still feel impossible. By the late 1990s, Arsenal had found their rhythm. Then Arsène Wenger arrived. The French manager didn't just see a brilliant footballer. He saw the player who could transform English football. Together, they changed what the Premier League believed was possible. English football had always admired power, directness, crosses, physical battles. Bergkamp introduced something different. Patience, precision, imagination. He didn't force football. He invited it. Every touch had a purpose. Every movement created space. Every pass carried possibility. Teammates learned a simple lesson. If Dennis Bergkamp wanted the ball somewhere, run there. He had already seen it. Then came Newcastle United. March 2002. A goal that would become one of football's greatest masterpieces. Robert Pires played the pass. Bergkamp received it with his back to goal. Nikos Debizas closed in. Most forwards would protect the ball. Most would lay it off. Most would turn away from danger. Dennis Bergkamp imagined something nobody else could see. With one magical touch, he guided the ball around the defender. Not past him. Around him. The defender turned one way. Bergkamp glided the other. Without breaking stride, he calmly finished beyond the goalkeeper. It wasn't just a goal. It was imagination becoming reality. His legs followed the game. His mind was already there. Then came France '98. The World Cup quarter-final. The Netherlands against Argentina. The score was level. Extra time was only moments away. One long pass traveled through the night sky. Bergkamp's first touch killed it instantly. His second touch moved it away from Roberto Ayala. His third touch found the far corner. Football history written in 3 touches. Even today, it's remembered as one of the greatest World Cup goals ever scored. Not because of power. Not because of speed. Because of perfection. His legs followed the game. His mind was already there. Back in North London, Arsenal continued to grow. League titles. FA Cups. Memorable European nights. Then came the season that would define an era. 2003. The Invincibles. An entire Premier League season. Without defeat. Thierry Henry scored the goals. Patrick Vieira dominated midfield. The defense stood firm. But many teammates would tell you, Dennis Bergkamp made everything connect. He was the heartbeat between defense and attack. The calm in football's chaos. The player who made everyone around him better. There was another side to Bergkamp's story. One that showed remarkable courage. He developed a fear of flying. A challenge that affected much of his later career. Rather than hide it, he adapted. He traveled by car, by train, whatever it took to keep playing. Some saw limitation. Dennis Bergkamp saw another problem to solve. Football has celebrated players who were faster, stronger, more athletic. Dennis Bergkamp reminded us that football has always belonged to thinkers. Players who solve problems before anyone else even sees them. Players who turn impossible ideas into unforgettable moments. That was his gift. He wasn't simply creative. He wasn't simply elegant. He wasn't simply intelligent. He was all three. At exactly the right moment. His football never looked rushed. Because his mind had already finished the move. Before everyone else had started it. Young players copied his goals. His first touch. His turns. His composure. Very few could copy what truly made him special. His vision. That cannot be taught. Only admired. Football has produced players with greater pace. Greater strength. Greater athleticism. But very few have ever understood the game. Quite like Dennis Bergkamp. Some players ran faster than everyone else. Dennis Bergkamp simply thought faster. His legs followed the game. His mind was already there. That is why Dennis Bergkamp will always remain a true footballing icon. Not because he made football look easy, but because he made the impossible look effortless. What is your favorite Dennis Bergkamp moment? Imagine walking into every stadium, knowing thousands of people would notice your face. before they ever noticed your football. That was Franck Ribéry's reality. People stared. People whispered. People judged. But football has always had one beautiful habit. Football always tells the truth. Born in Boulogne-sur-Mer, France, in 1983, Ribéry's life changed before he could even remember it. As a young child, he survived a serious car accident that left deep scars across his face. Those scars stayed with him forever. Growing up wasn't easy. Children stared. Some laughed. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Every mirror reminded him he looked different. He couldn't change his appearance. So he decided to change what people remembered him for. Football. On the streets of northern France. None of that mattered. The ball didn't care what you looked like. It only cared what you could do. And Franck Ribéry could do things very few others could. He attacked defenders with fearless confidence. If one challenge stopped him, he tried again, and again, and again. Every setback made him more determined. Nothing about Ribéry's journey was easy. He wasn't fast-tracked to superstardom. He earned every opportunity. Smaller clubs, long journeys, disappointments, moments where others questioned whether he would ever reach the very top. Many players would have accepted those doubts. Ribéry never did. Football always tells the truth. His talent became impossible to ignore. At Metz, then Galatasaray, then Marseille, supporters discovered something extraordinary. A winger who played without fear. He demanded the ball. He chased defenders. He tracked back. He worked relentlessly for his teammates. Every sprint, every tackle, every dribble. He played with joy. In Munich came calling. Joining one of Europe's biggest clubs changes players. Some shrink beneath the pressure. Others become legends. Franck Ribéry chose the second path. From the moment he arrived in Munich, he electrified the Bundesliga. Defenders couldn't predict him. Supporters couldn't wait to watch him. Every time he received the ball, the stadium expected magic. More often than not, they got exactly that. He wasn't simply quick. He was explosive. His first step created space. His close control invited defenders in, only to leave them behind. He didn't play safe. He played brave. Always looking forward. Always believing he could beat one more man. Football always tells the truth. Soon, another winger would arrive in Munich. A player with blistering pace, an unstoppable left foot, and the same obsession with winning. Together, they would become one of football's most feared partnerships. A partnership that would terrify defenders and delight football fans around the world. Ribéry. But together, they weren't just about to dominate Germany. They were about to conquer Europe. There are great partnerships. And then there are partnerships that define an era. Football had Xavi and Iniesta, York and Cole, Messi and Suarez. Bayern Munich had Ribéry, Franck Ribéry, Arjen Robben. Different journeys, different personalities, one shared obsession: winning. Together, they became every defender's nightmare. Robben attacked from the right, Ribéry from the left. If one couldn't break you, the other would. Defenders doubled up. Sometimes they even tripled up. It rarely mattered. The space they created for each other was impossible to contain. One moment Ribéry was racing past a fullback. The next, Robben was cutting inside onto that famous left foot. Football always tells the truth. By 2013, Bayern Munich had become a machine. Disciplined, relentless, hungry, and at the heart of it all was Franck Ribéry. This wasn't just the best football of his career. It was football at its highest level. That season, Bayern won the Bundesliga. They won the DFB Pokal. Then came Wembley. The UEFA Champions League final. Bayern Munich against Borussia Dortmund. An all-German showdown. The biggest night in European club football. The margins were tiny. The pressure was enormous. With the score locked at 1-1. Every mistake could decide history. Every touch mattered. Every run mattered. Every decision mattered. Then Ribéry produced one moment of brilliance. Receiving the ball under pressure. He slipped an exquisite backheel into the path of Arjen Robben. Without breaking stride, Robben raced through and scored the winning goal. Wembley erupted. Bayern were champions of Europe. It wasn't just an assist. It was trust. Two teammates who knew exactly where the other would be. Weeks later, the football world debated the Ballon d'Or. Many believed Franck Ribéry had done enough. He had won everything possible. He had been Bayern's driving force. He had delivered on football's biggest stages. Yet the award went elsewhere. For many supporters, it remains one of football's greatest individual controversies. Franck Ribéry never complained. He simply carried on playing. Because football had already told the truth. The years passed. Managers changed. Teammates came and went. But Ribéry remained. Running, pressing, creating, fighting. Even when injuries became more frequent, his desire never disappeared. He refused to give less than everything. Supporters didn't love him because he was perfect. They loved him because every match felt personal. Every sprint, every tackle, every dribble. He played with the hunger of someone who still had something to prove, even after winning almost everything. Football always tells the truth. When his Bayern journey finally came to an end, he left as one of the greatest players in the club's history. A legend. A Champions League winner. Multiple Bundesliga champion. A player who helped define an era. But his legacy reached far beyond trophies. He reminded millions of people that first impressions are often wrong. That determination can overcome doubt. That character matters more than appearance. That greatness isn't given. It's earned. Some people looked at Franck Ribéry and saw only a scar. Football looked deeper. It saw courage, creativity, joy, relentless determination, and one of the greatest wingers of his generation. Children growing up today may never understand the obstacles he faced. They won't know the whispers, the stares, the assumptions. They'll remember something far more important. The dribbles, the assists, the smile, the passion, the football. Because that's what lasts. Football has celebrated faster players, more elegant players, more prolific goal scorers. But very few have played with the same fearless heart as Franck Ribéry. He didn't spend his career trying to change how people saw him. He let his football do that instead. Football always tells the truth. Franck Ribéry wasn't defined by the scar he carried. He was defined by the courage with which he carried it. That is why Franck Ribéry will always remain a true footballing icon. Write down pointing backhand index. What is your favorite Franck Ribéry moment? Imagine standing in midfield and watching someone 6 feet 2 inches tall beginning to run towards you. You expect power. You expect strength. You prepare for a battle. Instead, he glides past you. His first touch is perfect. His balance is effortless. His stride eats up 20 yards in seconds. Before you've even turned around, he's gone. Football wasn't trying to stop Yaya Touré. Football was trying to understand him. Because there was no answer. For Yaya Touré. 4 generations. Football believed midfielders had limits. Some could defend. Some could create. Some could score. Some could lead. Nobody was supposed to do everything. Then Yaya Touré arrived, and quietly ignored every rule the game had ever written. He defended. He created. He scored. He dominated. He made the impossible look inevitable. Born in Bouak, Ivory Coast, in 1983, Yaya didn't grow up dreaming about becoming impossible. He simply dreamed about becoming a footballer. Like millions of children across Africa, football wasn't entertainment. It was opportunity. It was hope. It was freedom. Alongside his older brother Kolo, every dusty pitch became another classroom. Every match another lesson. Every defeat another reason to improve. Greatness wasn't waiting for him. He had to go and find it. Leaving home at a young age wasn't glamorous. No headlines. No television cameras. No promises. Just a suitcase. A football. And a belief that somewhere, someone would recognize what he could become. Belgium asked the first question. Could this powerful young midfielder succeed in Europe? Ukraine asked another. Could he cope with a tougher league? Greece wondered if he was ready to lead. France questioned whether he belonged among the elite. Every country asked something different. Football kept giving exactly the same answer. There was no answer. For Yaya Touré, the first thing people noticed was always his size. The second was how quickly they realized size meant nothing. He wasn't lumbering. He wasn't awkward. He wasn't predictable. He carried the ball like it was tied to his boots. He could burst through midfield without losing control. Opponents tried to push him off the ball. Most ended up bouncing backwards instead. It didn't look normal. Because it wasn't. Children usually dream of becoming strikers. They dream about scoring winning goals. Nobody dreams of becoming a midfielder until they watch someone who changes what a midfielder can be. Yaya Touré wasn't simply playing the position. He was redefining it. By the time he arrived at Monaco, Europe had stopped asking whether he was talented. Now they were asking something far more dangerous. How good could he become? Managers trusted him. Supporters admired him. Opponents feared him. He could slow a game down with one touch, or explode through the middle with the next. He dictated tempo. He carried responsibility. He made difficult football look remarkably simple. Football wasn't trying to stop Yaya Touré. Football was trying to understand him. Then came Barcelona, the greatest footballing classroom in the world. A club where technique wasn't admired. It was expected. Some wondered whether someone built like Yaya could ever fit into Pep Guardiola's vision. Strength wasn't supposed to belong in a team built on elegance. Yaya quietly proved strength and elegance could exist together. Surrounded by Xavi, Andrés Iniesta, Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets. Some players would have disappeared into the background. Yaya never needed to. He understood something many footballers never do. You don't have to be the loudest player to become one of the most important. Need somebody to recover possession? Yaya. Need somebody to break 3 defensive lines with one run? Yaya. Need somebody to remain calm while everyone else panics? Yaya. He became the balance inside one of football's greatest teams. The player who made brilliance possible. Then, football witnessed one of the greatest examples of trust. The 2009 UEFA Champions League final. Barcelona faced Manchester United. The biggest night in club football. Pep Guardiola looked at his squad. Injuries had left him short in defense. He had a decision to make. Play a defender, or trust his midfielder. He chose Yaya Touré. Against Cristiano Ronaldo. Against Wayne Rooney. Against the European champions. On the biggest stage imaginable. Most players would have seen pressure. Yaya Touré saw responsibility. Barcelona won. The treble was complete. Europe belonged to Barcelona. And Yaya Touré had shown the football world something extraordinary. He wasn't just capable of playing every role. He could master them. Most players would have stayed forever. Most players had already reached the top. Most players would never leave the greatest team in world football. Yaya Touré wasn't most players. Waiting in England was a club with enormous ambition. A club determined to change football forever. What they didn't know yet was that they had found the one midfielder capable of changing them first. Because the impossible was only just beginning. Manchester City weren't simply buying a midfielder. They were buying belief. Belief that they could challenge the established order. Belief that they could compete with Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool. Belief that they could become champions. They had ambition. Yaya Touré gave them identity. English football thought it knew what midfielders looked like. Hard-working, disciplined, box-to-box. Yaya Touré arrived and looked like something entirely different. He wasn't simply stronger than everyone else. He wasn't simply quicker. He wasn't simply more technical. He was all of those things at the same time. Football wasn't trying to stop Yaya Touré. Football was trying to understand him. Week after week, the impossible became routine. He collected the ball deep inside his own half. 3 opponents closed him down. 1 touch. 2 strides. Suddenly, they were chasing shadows. His long stride covered ground effortlessly. His balance refused to disappear. His strength made tackles feel almost meaningless. Watching him run through midfield felt less like football, and more like watching nature. Like trying to stop a river with your hands. There was no answer. For Yaya Touré, great players shine in big moments. Icons create them. In the 2011 FA Cup final, Manchester City were searching for their first major trophy in 35 years. Pressure surrounded every pass, every tackle, every decision. Then Yaya Touré did what he always seemed to do. He found the moment. His winning goal against Stoke City didn't just win a trophy. It changed the mentality of an entire football club. Sometimes, one goal changes history. 12 months later, Manchester City stood on the brink of something even bigger. The Premier League title. A battle that would last until the final seconds of the season. Everyone remembers Sergio Aguero. And rightly so. But championship-winning teams aren't built in 93 minutes. They're built across 38 games. Yaya Touré was the heartbeat of that title-winning side. The power. The composure. The player who carried Manchester City through moments when everything threatened to fall apart. Without him, there may never have been an Aguero moment. Then came 2013-14. The season many believe redefined what a midfielder could be. 20 Premier League goals. 20. From midfield. Not penalties alone. Not late tap-ins. Goals of every kind. Long-range strikes. Powerful runs. Delicate finishes. Free kicks. Big goals. Beautiful goals. Goals that win championships. Football wasn't supposed to work like this. Yaya Touré simply ignored the rulebook. Managers searched for ways to stop him. Press him? He played through it. Stand off? He drove forward. Double mark him? He found the spare man. Leave him space? He punished you from distance. Every tactical solution created another problem. Because there wasn't one version of Yaya Touré. There were 10. The same dominance carried on to the international stage. For Ivory Coast. He wasn't just their greatest player. He was their leader. Their captain. Their symbol of hope. Year after year. Expectation followed him everywhere. The weight of a nation rested on his shoulders. He never hid from it. He embraced it. In 2015, that patience was finally rewarded. Ivory Coast lifted the Africa Cup of Nations. For millions back home, it wasn't simply a football victory. It was a national celebration, a generation's dream fulfilled. And standing at the center of it all was Yaya Touré. Football wasn't trying to stop Yaya Touré. Football was trying to understand him. 4 times, he was named African Footballer of the Year. An extraordinary achievement. But awards only tell part of the story. Statistics tell another. The real measure of greatness is what people remember. Ask defenders. They'll remember trying to take the ball from him. Ask midfielders. They'll remember chasing him. Ask supporters. They'll remember rising from their seats every time he started to run. Because they knew something special might happen. Time eventually catches every footballer. Even the impossible. The explosive runs became less frequent. The games a little slower. New generations arrived. Football changed once again. But Yaya Touré had already changed it first. Today, when people speak about complete midfielders, his name is always part of the conversation. Not because he did one thing brilliantly. Because he did everything brilliantly. He defended, created, scored, led, inspired, dominated. He proved that one player could influence every phase of a football match. That wasn't evolution. It was transformation. Perhaps that's why Yaya Touré remains so difficult to compare. Who was really like him? A midfielder with the physique of a defender, the technique of a playmaker, the finishing of a striker, the composure of a champion. Football has produced great midfielders before. It has produced complete midfielders before. But none who combined every gift quite the way Yaya Touré did. There was no answer. For Yaya Touré, some players leave behind medals. Some leave behind records. Some leave behind unforgettable goals. Yaya Touré left behind something much rarer. He changed what football believed a midfielder could become. And perhaps that's why the question still has no perfect answer. How was Yaya Touré even possible? Because some players fit perfectly into football's history. Yaya Touré rewrote part of it. And that is why he will always remain a true footballing icon. Where does Yaya Touré rank among the greatest midfielders of all time? There are footballers who make the game look effortless. Then there are footballers who make sacrifice look beautiful. Every sprint, every tackle, every drop of sweat, every impossible run. Pavel Nedvěd never asked football for anything. He earned everything. And perhaps that was both his greatest strength and his greatest heartbreak. Some players were born to entertain. Pavel Nedvěd was born to compete. Watching old footage of Pavel Nedvěd, one thing becomes immediately obvious. He never stops moving. Not for a second. While others waited for the game to come to them, Nedvěd chased it. If the ball was 50 yards away, he ran. If his team needed one more tackle, he ran. If there was one final attack in the 94th minute, he was still running. Football has produced faster players, more skillful players, more elegant players. Very few ever worked harder. Born in Szeb, Czechoslovakia, in August 1972, Pavel Nedvěd grew up in a country where discipline wasn't optional. It was expected. From an early age, he discovered that talent might open a door, but determination was what carried you through it. Football quickly became more than a hobby. It became an obsession. The young boy with endless energy wasn't trying to become famous. He was simply trying to become better. Every single day. As he developed through Czech football, coaches noticed something unusual. He wasn't the biggest player. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the quickest over 5 yards. Yet somehow, he influenced every match. Because football intelligence cannot be measured with a stopwatch. Nedvěd understood space. He understood timing. Most importantly, he understood responsibility. His breakthrough at Sparta Prague confirmed what many already suspected. This wasn't simply another promising midfielder. This was a leader. He helped Sparta dominate domestically, winning league titles, earning European experience, and attracting attention from clubs across the continent. But bigger challenges were waiting. In 1996, everything changed. The European Championship. The Czech Republic arrived with little expectation. Few believed they could compete with Europe's traditional giants. Pavel Nedvěd believed differently. Alongside a remarkable generation including Karel Poborsky and Patrik Berger, the Czechs stunned Europe. Victory after victory. Performance after performance. They reached the final. The dream only ended against Germany after Oliver Bierhof's famous golden goal. They left without the trophy. But Pavel Nedvěd left with something just as valuable. Europe now knew his name. The warrior had arrived. Italy came calling. Lazio, a club desperate to challenge the established order. Italian football in the late 1990s was the toughest league in the world. Defenders were relentless. Midfields were battlefields. Nothing came easily. Pavel Nedvěd wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Some players adapt slowly. Nedvěd attacked the challenge. His running never stopped. His tackling never weakened. His shooting became feared. Supporters quickly fell in love with the blonde-haired midfielder who played every game as though it might be his last. He wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing victory. Every single week. Lazio became one of Europe's finest teams. Serie A title. Coppa Italia. Italian Super Cup. UEFA Cup Winners' Cup. UEFA Super Cup. Nedvěd was at the heart of everything. Not because he demanded attention, but because he demanded excellence. From himself. From his teammates. From everyone around him. Then came the biggest transfer of his career. In 2001, Juventus needed to replace one of football's greatest ever players. Zinedine Zidane. Many believed replacing Zidane was impossible. Juventus weren't looking for another Zidane. They were looking for another leader. They chose Pavel Nedvěd. Some questioned the decision. How do you replace genius? The answer was never to copy it. It was to create something different. Something relentless. Something fearless. Something extraordinary. Pavel Nedvěd wasn't about to replace Zidane. He was about to become Pavel Nedvěd. By the summer of 2001, Juventus had lost more than a player. They had lost Zinedine Zidane. The French genius had departed for Real Madrid in a world record transfer. Many believed Juventus would never recover. How do you replace one of the greatest footballers ever? The answer was not with another Zidane. It was with a warrior. Pavel Nedvěd never tried to imitate greatness. He created his own. His game wasn't built on tricks. It wasn't built on showmanship. It was built on commitment. Every sprint, every challenge, every recovery run. He played with an intensity that inspired everyone around him. Because effort is contagious. Juventus quickly realized what they had signed. Not simply a midfielder. A leader. A player who refused to accept defeat. When matches became difficult, Nedvěd demanded more. When teammates grew tired, he somehow found another gear. He wasn't the loudest voice in the dressing room. He didn't need to be. His football spoke for him. Some leaders give instructions. Others set the example. The 2002-03 season became the defining campaign of his career. Juventus were chasing domestic glory, European glory, immortality. Week after week, Nedvěd delivered. Goals, assists, tackles, relentless running, complete performances. He wasn't simply playing well. He was dragging one of Europe's biggest clubs towards another Champions League final. There was never an easy game, only another challenge. And Pavel Nedvěd loved challenges. Then came the UEFA Champions League semi-final. Juventus against Real Madrid. One of football's greatest occasions. Madrid led after the first leg. Juventus needed something extraordinary. They found it. David Trezeguet scored. Alessandro Del Piero produced a captain's performance. Nedvěd controlled the midfield with his usual relentless energy. Juventus were on their way. Then, it happened. A tackle. A whistle. One yellow card. At the final whistle, the stadium celebrated reaching the final. Pavel Nedvěd didn't. He already knew. One booking too many. One suspension. One dream. Gone. Cameras caught the disbelief. Then the tears. Not because Juventus had failed. Because he had helped them reach the biggest match in club football. And would have to watch it from the stands. Sometimes, the greatest sacrifice isn't choosing to give everything. It's living with the price of doing so. 3 weeks later, Juventus walked onto the pitch at Old Trafford for the Champions League final against AC Milan. Their greatest warrior wasn't beside them. The match ended goalless. It went to penalties. Juventus lost. Football has always wondered, would the outcome have been different if Pavel Nedvěd had been there? It's one of the game's greatest unanswered questions. Heartbreak didn't define him. His response did. The following season, Pavel Nedvěd reached the greatest individual honor in European football, the Ballon d'Or. He became only the second Czech player ever to win it after Josef Masopust. In an era featuring Thierry Henry, Paolo Maldini, Roberto Carlos, and Zinedine Zidane, Europe chose Pavel Nedvěd. Not because he was the flashiest. Because he was extraordinary. Many footballers reach the top, then begin to slow down. Not Nedvěd. Into his 30s. He continued covering every blade of grass. Opponents half his age struggled to match his energy. Supporters never questioned his commitment. Every match felt personal. Every challenge mattered. That relentless desire became his trademark. Across 8 unforgettable seasons at Juventus, he won Serie A titles, captained the side, and became one of the club's modern legends. Supporters didn't admire him simply because he was gifted. They admired him because he represented everything they wanted their club to be. Honest, fearless, relentless. Internationally, he remained the heartbeat of the Czech Republic. More than 90 caps. Countless unforgettable performances. A generation inspired by one player who refused to stop believing. Whether wearing the colors of club or country, his standards never changed. Run, fight, compete, repeat. When retirement finally arrived in 2009, football lost something rare. Not just another great midfielder. One of its greatest competitors. Even today, when people speak about complete commitment, Pavel Nedvěd's name always enters the conversation. Because talent can inspire admiration. Character earns respect. Perhaps that's why supporters still love him. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't effortless. He wasn't the most naturally gifted footballer of his generation. He simply gave everything he had. Every single time he stepped onto a football pitch. And somehow, that became unforgettable. Some players are remembered for what they won. Others, for what they sacrificed. Pavel Nedvěd gave football everything, even when football couldn't give everything back. Maybe that's why his story still resonates today. Not because of one trophy, not because of one award, not even because of the Ballon d'Or, but because he proved that greatness isn't measured only by victory. It's measured by the courage to keep running, even when you know the cost. Some players entertained. Some players inspired. Pavel Nedvěd showed us what relentless commitment truly looked like. And that is why he will always remain a true footballing icon. Where does Pavel Nedvěd rank among the greatest midfielders of his generation? Some footballers spend their entire careers trying to prove themselves. Others never have to. From the moment Nicolas Anelka stepped onto a football pitch, everyone knew he was different. Quick, elegant, ice-cold in front of goal. A striker who never looked rushed, even when the whole stadium held its breath. He would win league titles across Europe, lift the UEFA Champions League, become a Premier League Golden Boot winner, play for some of the biggest clubs in football history. And yet, despite everything he achieved, he remains one of football's most misunderstood figures. This is the story of Nicolas Anelka. Football has always loved easy stories. The loyal one-club legend, the local hero, the captain, the villain. Nicolas Anelka never fitted into any of those categories. He wasn't interested in creating an image. He simply wanted to play football. That made him difficult for many people to understand. Born on the 14th of March, 1979 in Le Chesnay, just outside Paris, Anelka grew up in Trappes, a suburb that produced talented footballers but demanded resilience. Football wasn't just a pastime. It was a way of standing out, a way of escaping, a way of proving yourself. From an early age, Anelka's talent was impossible to ignore. His speed was frightening, his first touch effortless, his finishing instinctive. But perhaps his greatest weapon was his composure. Even as a teenager, he played with the calm of a veteran. That talent soon caught the attention of Paris Saint-Germain, one of France's biggest clubs. It seemed the perfect place for one of the country's brightest young prospects. But another man had already recognized something extraordinary. Arsène Wenger. The Arsenal manager believed English football had never seen a striker quite like Nicolas Anelka. In 1997, he brought the teenager to North London. Few realized they were witnessing the beginning of one of football's most fascinating careers. English football was faster, more physical, less forgiving. Young foreign players often struggled to adapt. Anelka looked as though he'd been playing there his whole life. His pace terrified defenders. His movement created space that others couldn't see. He drifted into dangerous positions without attracting attention. Then, in a single burst, he was gone. It wasn't just speed. It was intelligence. He rarely wasted energy. Every run had a purpose. Every touch had a destination. The breakthrough came quickly. Ian Wright was Arsenal's established hero. But as Wright moved towards the latter stages of his Arsenal career, Anelka stepped forward without fear. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flamboyant. He simply scored. Again. And again. And again. Supporters soon gave him a nickname, Le Sulk. Many believed it reflected his personality. Quiet, reserved, distant. But those closest to him often told a different story. Anelka wasn't arrogant. He was private. There is a difference. The 1997-98 season changed everything. Arsenal were chasing history. Manchester United stood in their way. Pressure surrounded every match. For most teenagers, it would have been overwhelming. For Nicolas Anelka, it became an opportunity. He produced goals when Arsenal needed them most. His pace stretched defenses. His finishing settled nerves. His maturity shocked experienced professionals. By the end of the season, Arsenal had completed a famous Premier League and FA Cup double. The teenager from Paris had become one of England's brightest stars. Europe had taken notice. Suddenly, every major club wanted Nicolas Anelka. Real Madrid came calling. The biggest club in world football. For many players, there would be no decision to make. When Real Madrid asked, "You listen." In 1999, Anelka left Arsenal after just 2 remarkable seasons. Many supporters couldn't understand it. Why leave so soon? Why leave a manager who believed in you? Why leave a team that was winning? Those questions would follow him for the rest of his career. Madrid promised glamour, prestige, Galacticos before the Galacticos. But football doesn't always follow the script. In Spain, the goals didn't flow as easily, came a headline. Every quiet moment was mistaken for unhappiness. For the first time in his career, Nicolas Anelka wasn't simply fighting defenders. He was fighting perception. The world had started writing its own version of Nicolas Anelka. The problem was, it wasn't always the truth. The football world thought it had already made up its mind. Nicolas Anelka was difficult, restless, impossible to manage. But managers saw something different. They saw a striker blessed with extraordinary talent, a player capable of deciding the biggest matches, a footballer worth taking a chance on, again, and again, and again. Despite everything that had happened in Madrid, one night reminded Europe exactly why Real Madrid had signed him. The UEFA Champions League, football's biggest stage, against Bayern Munich. Anelka delivered when the pressure was at its highest. His goals helped send Real Madrid to the final. Weeks later, they lifted the European Cup. Even in the most difficult period of his career, he had proved he could perform when it mattered most. But success on the pitch couldn't repair everything behind the scenes. His time in Spain came to an end. The journey continued. Back in France, Paris Saint-Germain welcomed him home. Many believed returning to familiar surroundings would finally bring stability. Instead, the questions continued. Every transfer, every interview, every decision, only added to the mystery surrounding Nicolas Anelka. Was he searching for the perfect club, or simply somewhere he could be himself? In 2002, Liverpool came calling. Manager Gerard Houllier believed Anelka deserved another opportunity in English football. For a few months, it looked like the perfect reunion. The intelligent movement was still there. The calm finishing, the effortless pace. Liverpool supporters wanted him to stay. But football had other ideas. The move was never made permanent. Once again, Anelka was packing his bags. His next destination was Manchester City. Long before the trophies. Long before the billions. Manchester City needed a leader. They found one in Nicolas Anelka. Week after week, he carried the attack. Goals became expected. Defenders knew exactly who the danger was. Stopping him proved far more difficult. He finished as the club's top scorer and reminded the Premier League that his talent had never disappeared. Only the headlines had suggested otherwise. Then came another unexpected chapter. Turkey. Fenerbahce. Many questioned the move. Anelka answered in the only way he knew how. By scoring goals. He helped Fenerbahce lift the Turkish league title and once again showed that wherever he went, he found success. Different country. Different language. Same Nicolas Anelka. Then, in 2006, England called once more. Not Arsenal. Not Liverpool. Bolton Wanderers. To some, it looked like another step backwards. To Sam Allardyce, it was the signing of a world-class striker. For the first time in years, Anelka looked completely free. There were no Galacticos. No impossible expectations. No daily headlines questioning his future. Just football. And when football became the only story, Nicolas Anelka reminded everyone exactly how good he really was. His confidence returned. His smile returned. Bolton supporters adored him. Not because he chased attention, but because he never needed it. His football spoke louder than any newspaper ever could. The same football world that had questioned him for years was suddenly asking a different question. Had they judged Nicolas Anelka too quickly? One club certainly thought so. Chelsea, a club chasing Premier League titles, European glory, and searching for a striker capable of delivering in the biggest moments. For Nicolas Anelka, another opportunity had arrived. Not to prove he was talented. Everyone already knew that. This time, he had the chance to prove that great years were still ahead of him. One final opportunity, one final chance, to change the way football remembered Nicolas Anelka. By the time he arrived at Stamford Bridge in January 2008, he was no longer the teenage wonder kid, no longer the player every newspaper wanted to criticize. He was experienced, wiser, and ready for the biggest challenge of his career. Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, Michael Ballack, Ashley Cole. This wasn't a team looking for potential. It demanded success. Immediately, Anelka understood exactly what was expected. Goals, trophies, pressure. It was everything he'd experienced before. Only this time, he looked completely at ease. His first season almost ended in glory. Chelsea reached the 2008 UEFA Champions League final. A dramatic night in Moscow. After extra time, the final went to penalties. Anelka stepped forward. His penalty was saved. Manchester United became European champions. For many players, that moment would define them forever. For Nicolas Anelka, it became another chapter in a career built on resilience. He didn't hide. He came back stronger. The following season, he produced the finest football of his career. Confident, clinical, consistent. Week after week, the goals kept coming. Defenders couldn't match his movement. Goalkeepers couldn't predict his finishing. He wasn't simply scoring. He was leading Chelsea's attack. By the end of the campaign, Nicolas Anelka was the Premier League's Golden Boot winner. A remarkable achievement, especially for a player so many believed had already reached his peak years before. Football had questioned him. He answered with goals. Success continued to follow. Chelsea lifted the Premier League title in 2010. They added the FA Cup to complete a famous domestic double. Anelka had become exactly what every manager who signed him believed he could be. Reliable. Experienced. A winner. Perhaps. The football world was finally beginning to appreciate him. His international career told a different story. Representing France had brought unforgettable highs. He was part of the squad that won UEFA Euro 2000, adding another major international honor to an already remarkable career. But with France, controversy always seemed close behind. That reached its peak at the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa. An argument with coach Raymond Domenech exploded into one of the biggest controversies in French football history. Anelka was sent home. The squad refused to train. France became front-page news for all the wrong reasons. Once again, the headlines focused on Nicolas Anelka, not the footballer, the man. For many people, that became the lasting image. But was it fair? Because when the noise faded, the facts remained. League champion in England, League champion in France, League champion in Turkey, Champions League winner, Premier League Golden Boot winner, UEFA European Championship winner, hundreds of goals, hundreds of appearances, a career that most professionals could only dream of. Yet somehow, the conversation always seemed to return to controversy. Perhaps that says more about football than it does about Nicolas Anelka. After Chelsea, his career took him to China, Italy, India, continuing to share his experience across the world before eventually moving into coaching. The hunger to compete never truly disappeared. Football had been his life. It always would be. Today, people still debate Nicolas Anelka. Some remember the transfers. Some remember the headlines. Some remember the controversy. But football isn't played in newspapers. It's played on grass. And when Nicolas Anelka stepped onto a football pitch, there were very few players who could do what he could. His pace, his movement, his composure. his finishing, his intelligence. For more than 2 decades, they made defenders' lives a nightmare. Perhaps Nicolas Anelka wasn't always the easiest player to understand. Perhaps he wasn't always the easiest player to manage. But one thing was never in doubt. He could play. He won league titles across Europe. He became a Champions League winner, a Premier League champion, a Premier League Golden Boot winner, a European champion with France. And everywhere he went, managers kept believing in him, because they all recognized the same thing. An extraordinary footballer. History will always remember the headlines. But those who watched Nicolas Anelka every single week will remember something far more important. One of the most naturally gifted strikers of his generation. A player who could glide past defenders, finish with either foot, and make the hardest game in the world look effortless. Maybe Nicolas Anelka wasn't the easiest player to handle. Maybe he wasn't the easiest player to understand. But there was one thing nobody could ever question. Just how good he was. And that is why Nicolas Anelka will always remain a true footballing icon. Where does Nicolas Anelka rank among the greatest strikers his era? Some footballers played football. Carlos Tevez fought it. Every sprint, every tackle, every challenge, every goal. He played every match as though it was his last. Because to Carlos Tevez, football wasn't just a game. It was survival. But don't let the passion fool you. Behind the relentless determination was an extraordinary footballer. A striker blessed with power, technique, vision, and a habit of producing spectacular goals when his team needed them most. This is the story of football's ultimate warrior. Long before the packed stadiums, before the Premier League titles, before the Champions League, there was a young boy growing up in Fuerte Apache, one of Argentina's toughest neighborhoods, a place where opportunities were rare, and life could change in an instant. Football wasn't simply entertainment. It was hope. It was escape. It was a chance to build a different future. At just 10 months old, Carlos suffered severe burns after boiling water was accidentally spilled over his face, neck, and chest. The scars would remain with him forever. As he grew older, many suggested surgery. Tevez always refused. The scars reminded him where he'd come from. They reminded him what he'd survived. And if they made other people uncomfortable, that wasn't his problem. That mindset would define his entire career. Never complain. Never hide. Keep fighting. Football quickly became his identity. From the moment he stepped onto a pitch, he competed like every ball was the last. He chased everything. He tackled everything. He refused to accept defeat. Even in training, teammates spoke about his unbelievable desire to win. It wasn't something he switched on during matches. It was simply who he was. That relentless attitude earned him a place at Boca Juniors, one of the most demanding clubs in world football. Boca supporters have always admired one quality above all others: commitment. Players who give everything for the shirt become heroes. Carlos Tevez became one of them almost immediately. He played every game with fearless intensity. The supporters saw one of their own. A player who understood exactly what representing Boca Juniors meant. But there was another side to Carlos Tevez. One that people sometimes forget. Because the fight was so obvious. They overlooked the brilliance. He could play. His first touch was exceptional. His balance made him almost impossible to knock off the ball. He could dribble through crowded defenses, strike with either foot, score thunderous long-range goals, or produce a moment of magic when nobody expected it. The fight caught your attention. The talent kept you watching. Success followed quickly. League titles arrived. Then came the Copa Libertadores, South America's greatest club competition. In 2003, Tevez inspired Boca Juniors to continental glory. Months later, they faced AC Milan in the Intercontinental Cup, the champions of Europe. Against the champions of South America. Most expected Milan to win. Carlos Tevez had other ideas. He scored. He battled. He inspired. After penalties, Boca Juniors became world champions. The boy from Fuerte Apache had announced himself to the footballing world. Europe expected him next. Instead, he surprised everyone. Corinthians. Brazil. It was one of the biggest transfers in South American football history. Many questioned why he hadn't gone to Europe. Carlos answered in the only way he ever knew. By winning. He captained Corinthians, inspired them to the Brazilian league title, and was named the league's best player. Different country, different football, same relentless warrior. By 2006, Europe could wait no longer. Carlos Tevez arrived in the Premier League with West Ham United. The transfer attracted controversy, but once the football began, none of that mattered. West Ham were fighting for survival. Every match felt like a cup final. Every point mattered. And every time the pressure increased, Carlos Tevez seemed to become even stronger. Week after week, he dragged West Ham toward safety. Goals, assists, endless running, refusing to accept defeat. Then came Old Trafford, the final day of the season. Manchester United away. West Ham needed a result to stay in the Premier League. The pressure was enormous. Most players would have hidden. Carlos Tevez demanded the ball. When the chance arrived, he stayed calm. One composed finish. One unforgettable goal. West Ham survived. It remains one of the most important goals in the club's history. One goal. One football club saved. One country suddenly asking, who is Carlos Tevez? Sir Alex Ferguson already knew. And he believed. Football's ultimate warrior belonged at Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson didn't sign Carlos Tevez because he needed another striker. He signed him because he needed a warrior. At Manchester United, talent was expected. Hard work was demanded. Carlos Tevez brought both. Alongside Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, and a squad packed with world-class talent, Tevez became one of the hardest-working forwards in world football. He chased every lost cause, pressed every defender, made every tackle, and somehow, still had the energy to score goals. It was impossible not to admire him. The partnership between Rooney, Ronaldo, and Tevez quickly became one of the most feared attacks in Europe. Each player offered something different. Rooney brought power. Ronaldo brought brilliance. Tevez brought relentless fight. Together, they helped Manchester United dominate English football. Back-to-back Premier League titles followed. Then came Moscow, the 2008 UEFA Champions League final. Manchester United against Chelsea. One of the biggest nights in the club's history. When the penalty shootout arrived, Carlos Tevez stepped forward without hesitation. He scored. Manchester United became champions of Europe. Football's ultimate warrior had reached the summit of club football. Supporters loved him. Teammates respected him. Sir Alex Ferguson wanted him to stay. But football doesn't always follow the script. Negotiations became complicated. Uncertainty surrounded his future. Then came one of the most shocking decisions English football had ever seen. Carlos Tevez crossed Manchester City. To United supporters, it felt unforgivable. To City supporters, it felt like a declaration that their club was ready to challenge the very best. The famous welcome to Manchester billboard became one of football's most iconic images. The rivalry had become deeply personal. Carlos Tevez didn't answer with interviews. He answered on the pitch. Goals, leadership, commitment. Week after week, he dragged Manchester City forward. He captained the side, inspired them to FA Cup glory in 2011, ending a 35-year wait for a major trophy. Then came the greatest Premier League title race the country had ever seen. Every match carried enormous pressure. Every point mattered. Carlos Tevez never hid from responsibility. when Manchester City finally lifted the Premier League trophy in dramatic fashion. His fingerprints were all over one of the greatest achievements in the club's history. Yet for all his fight, people sometimes forgot something. Carlos Tevez wasn't just relentless. He was outrageously talented. He could score from 30 yards, beat defenders in impossible spaces, finish with either foot, produce moments of magic from nothing. The effort caught your eye. The ability won football matches. Another challenge awaited. Italy. Juventus. Many believed his best years were behind him. Carlos Tevez disagreed. He became the heartbeat of another great team, winning back-to-back Serie A titles, being named Serie A Footballer of the Year, leading Juventus back to the UEFA Champions League final. Another country, another league, another success story. Because wherever Carlos Tevez went, he found a way to win. But there was always one place that truly felt like home. Boca Juniors. Returning wasn't about money. It wasn't about prestige. It was about identity. The supporters welcomed back one of their own. The boy from Fuerte Apache had come full circle. His international career reflected exactly the same spirit. Playing for Argentina was never guaranteed. Competition was fierce. Yet every time Carlos Tevez wore the famous blue and white shirt, he played with exactly the same intensity. He helped Argentina win Olympic gold in Athens in 2004, finishing as the tournament's top scorer. He represented his country at 2 FIFA World Cups and several Copa America tournaments. Although the biggest international prize escaped him, no one ever questioned his commitment. He never stopped running. He never stopped believing. He never stopped fighting. When people remember Carlos Tevez, they often talk about his passion, his determination, his courage, and they're right. But don't ever let those qualities overshadow his football, because beneath the fearless tackles, the endless running, and the warrior mentality, was one of the finest forwards of his generation. A player who won league titles in Argentina, Brazil, England, and Italy. A Champions League winner, an Olympic champion, a footballer capable of moments that left supporters speechless. Some players are remembered because they made football look easy. Carlos Tevez made the hardest game in the world look like a fight. Every sprint, every tackle, every goal, every badge. He gave everything. He never cheated the game. He never cheated the supporters. And he never stopped fighting. Maybe Carlos Tevez wasn't football's perfect player. But if you were building a team, if you wanted someone beside you when everything was on the line, there weren't many players in history you would choose ahead of Carlos Tevez. Because trophies fade, goals are replayed, but heart is remembered forever. And that's why Carlos Tevez will always be football's ultimate warrior. Before you go, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to every single one of you who has watched, liked, commented, shared and subscribed to True Footballing Icons this week. Your support means more than you know. This week we've looked back at the incredible careers of Fabio Cannavaro, Dennis Bergkamp, Franck Ribéry, Yaya Touré, Pavel Nedvěd, Nicolas Anelka, and now, Carlos Tevez. 7 completely different footballers, different countries, different positions, different personalities, different journeys, but they all reached the very top of the game in their own way. Some led through courage, some through elegance, some through intelligence, some through determination, and some through an unstoppable fighting spirit. That's what makes football so special. There is no single path to becoming a legend. Only the courage to become the very best version of yourself. If you've missed any of this week's documentaries, they're all waiting for you now on the channel. And finally, who would you like to see featured next on True Footballing Icons? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of True Footballing Icons.